The horizon bled into itself where sea met sky, both the color of old bruises. Roderick Faring stood at the prow of the Storm's Daughter and watched the coastline of the Shadowlands emerge from the perpetual haze like a corpse rising from still water. 30 years he'd sailed the Jade Sea, from Korth to the Thousand Islands, but he had never dared come this far east. No sane captain did. There it is, then, said Bolaro, stepping beside him. The Lycene first mate's silver hair whipped in the wind, and his blue eyes, startlingly pale even among his people, fixed on the black smudge ahead. Asshai-by-the-Shadow, the arsehole of the world. Mind your tongue, Roderick said, though without heat. We're here to trade, not blaspheme. Trade. Bolaro spat over the rail. What man trades in Asshai who has any other choice? It was a fair question, the same one Roderick's wife had asked 6 months ago, standing in their modest manse in Storm's End. Why there? Why now? She'd clutched their youngest daughter to her breast, fear plain in her eyes. He'd told her what he'd told the crew, because there was profit in it, because the jade merchants in Korth spoke of Asshai's gold flowing freely, for those brave enough to carry Westerosi goods so far. Because House Faring, for all its ancient lineage, held only a modest keep in the Stormlands, and Roderick's father had left him with more debts than dragons. He had not told her about the dreams. They'd begun a year ago, always the same, a city of black stone beside a black river, and a voice calling his name in a language he did not know, but somehow understood. He'd dismissed them at first. What sailor didn't have strange dreams after too much sour wine? But they'd grown more insistent, more real, until he'd wake with the taste of ash in his mouth and the certainty that something waited for him in the east. "Captain!" Young Torwin called down from the crow's nest, his voice cracking with youth and uncertainty. "The river, sir. Gods preserve us. The stories are true. The Ash River." Even from this distance, Roderick could see it was unlike any waterway he'd ever encountered. It flowed black as ink. No, blacker, like liquid shadow, from the heart of the Shadowlands into the Jade Sea. Where it met the green waters, there was no gradual mixing, no muddy transition. The two remained separate, as if the river itself rejected union with the natural world. "Steady," Roderick called to his crew. "We've come too far to turn back for superstition." But his hand found the 7-pointed star he wore beneath his shirt, a gift from his mother. He was no pious man. Years at sea had beaten most faith from him, but old habits died hard. The Storm's Daughter was a merchant cog, broad-beamed and practical, built in the shipyards of Storm's End 40 years ago, and maintained with more prayer than coin. Her holds carried salt pork, arbor wine, Dornish oranges preserved in honey, northern furs, and Westerosi steel. Common enough goods, but rare this far east, where even the free cities were distant memories. As they drew closer, Asshai revealed itself in pieces. First, the wall, impossibly tall, made of the same black stone as the river, its surface so smooth it seemed almost wet. No banners flew from its battlements. No guards walked its heights. The city simply was, immense and silent and wrong. "No smoke," Bolaro observed. "A city that size should have 1,000 cook fires." He was right. No smoke rose from the buildings visible beyond the wall. No sound carried across the water. The docks, when they came into view, held perhaps a dozen ships, strange, lean vessels with black sails and hulls carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Take us in," Roderick ordered, his voice steadier than his hands. The crew obeyed, but he could feel their fear. They were good men, most of them, Storm's End born, loyal to House Faring, if not always to the gods. But this place tested loyalty. Torwin's hands shook on the lines. Old Garrett, who'd sailed with Roderick's father, muttered prayers under his breath. Even Bolaro, who claimed to fear nothing, kept one hand on his sword hilt. The docks were made of the same black stone as everything else. As they tied off, Roderick realized with a cold certainty that he could not identify the material. Not granite, not basalt, not any stone he knew. It was black, utterly, absolutely black, and faintly warm to the touch despite the chill wind. Stay with the ship, Roderick told Garrett. No one leaves without my word. Gladly, Captain, the old man replied. Roderick, Bolaro, and 4 others, Torwin included. Though the boy looked ready to piss himself, stepped onto the dock. The stone felt strange beneath their boots, too smooth, almost slick. The city loomed beyond a maze of warehouses and merchant stalls, all built of that same unnatural black stone. And then Roderick saw them, the Shadowbinders. 3 of them stood at the edge of the dock, watching. They wore flowing robes of dark red silk that seemed to drink the light, and their faces were hidden behind lacquered masks, also red, painted with golden symbols Roderick did not recognize. They did not speak. They simply watched, utterly still, as if they were carved from the same stone as their city. 7 hells, Torwin whispered. One of the Shadowbinders moved then, a fluid motion like oil spreading across water. She, glided toward them, and Roderick forced himself not to step back. The mask showed no eyes, only smooth red surface, yet he felt the weight of a gaze upon him. You are far from home, Storm King's man. The voice was neither male nor female, speaking the common tongue with an accent Roderick could not place. What brings a son of the Greenlands to the Shadow? Trade, Roderick managed. I carry goods from Westeros. I seek to... You seek, the Shadowbinder interrupted, but not what you think you seek. The masked head tilted, considering. You have dreamed of this place. Ice flooded Roderick's veins. He had told no one of the dreams, not even his wife. I don't know what you... The shadow calls to some. The figure raised one pale hand, the fingers too long, the nails painted black. Most resist. Most return to their green lands and warm beds and pretend the calling was merely nightmare. But you answered. Belaro's hand tightened on his sword. Captain, we should... Peace, Lysine. The Shadowbinder's attention shifted. There is no threat here. Not yet. Not unless you seek what should not be sought. The mask turned back to Roderick. Your cargo will find buyers. In Asshai, all things find their price. But take care, Storm King's man. Some prices are paid in coin. Others... The figure trailed off, then gestured deeper into the city. The street of brass. Ask for the merchant Jan. He will take your goods and give you fair weight in gold. More than fair, perhaps, for one who has answered the calling. Before Roderick could respond, the Shadowbinder glided away, robes trailing on the black stone. The other 2 followed, moving in that same unsettling manner, until they disappeared into the maze of buildings. Captain, Bolaro said urgently, we should sell what we can and leave, today, now. We've come too far to turn back, Roderick repeated, but the words felt hollow. They moved into the city proper, and with each step, Roderick felt the wrongness intensify. The streets were too wide, built for crowds that did not exist. The buildings rose impossibly tall, their windows like empty eye sockets. And everywhere, that black stone, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But worse than the architecture was the absence. No children played in the streets, no dogs barked, no cats prowled the alleys. The few people they passed moved silently, swathed in robes and scarves, faces hidden. Some wore masks like the Shadowbinders. Others simply kept their heads down, as if afraid to be seen. Where are the children? Torwin whispered. It was Bolaro who answered, his voice tight. There are no children in Asshai. Everyone knows this. No children are born here. Those who come here young do not stay young long. Superstition, Roderick said, but he'd noticed it too. Not one child, not even a crying babe. They found the Street of Brass, though the name was a mockery. The street was black stone like all the others, and the brass decorations on the merchant stalls were tarnished and strange. The merchant Jahan proved to be a tall man, or perhaps a woman, Roderick could not tell, wrapped in gray silk with amber eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Ah, Jan said, voice smooth as oil. The storm's daughter. I have been expecting you. How could you? Word travels in Asshai, Captain Faring, especially word of a Westerosi captain fool enough to sail into the shadow. Jan's smile was not comforting. Show me your cargo. The transaction was surreal. Jan examined their goods with long, careful fingers, sometimes holding items to her, nose, and inhaling deeply. The arbor wine received the particular attention, as did the northern firs. The Dornish oranges, preserved in honey, made Jan laugh, a sound like wind chimes in a tomb. These will fetch a high price, Jan said. There are those in Asshai who remember the taste of living fruit. Most food here is imported, you understand. Nothing grows in the shadow. Not naturally. What do you mean, not naturally? Roderick asked. Jan's amber eyes fixed on him. In Asshai, Captain, nature is a suggestion, not a law. But you will learn this, I think. You have the mark. What mark? What are you talking about? The calling. Jan gestured vaguely. The shadow-touched always find their way here eventually. You dream of this place, yes? You hear whispers in languages you do not speak? You wake with ash on your tongue? Roderick said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Thought so. Jan turned back to the goods. I will give you twice what these are worth in Korth. Gold, not trade goods. But I will also give you advice, worth more than gold. Leave Asshai as soon as you can. Sell your cargo, take your coin, and sail west. Do not linger. Do not explore. Do not ask questions. The shadow calls, yes, but you need not answer. And if I stay? Jan was quiet for a long moment. Then you will learn why there are no children in Asshai, Captain Faring. And you will learn why those of us who dwell here no longer cast shadows the same as other men. Before Roderick could ask what that meant, a figure emerged from the crowd. Another person in a red mask. But this one's robes were black instead of red, and silver symbols crawled across the fabric like living things. Captain Roderick Faring. This voice was definitely feminine, low and rich. I am Melara. I have been searching for a man like you. I'm not interested in... You have a ship. You have a crew. And you have answered the calling. Melara stepped closer, and Roderick caught a scent like cinnamon and rot. I need to venture deeper into the Shadowlands, beyond Asshai, to places that do not appear on any map. I can pay you. No, Bolaro said flatly. Captain, tell her no. But Roderick found himself asking, pay me with what? Bolaro reached into her robes and withdrew something small, wrapped in black silk. She unfolded the cloth carefully, revealing an object the size of a child's fist, scaled and petrified. A dragon's egg. 3 of these, Melara said softly. Genuine, from the shadow. Not the pretty stone eggs you find in Korth, but real eggs, from real dragons. Petrified, yes, but containing residual fire. Valuable beyond measure to the right buyer. 3 eggs, Captain. Enough to clear your father's debts, and buy a holdfast worthy of House Faring's ancient name. Roderick stared at the egg. In the dim light of Asshai, it seemed to pulse with inner warmth, and the scales caught the light like dark opals. It was everything he needed. It was everything he'd risked this voyage to find. Captain, Bolaro said, urgent now. Whatever she's offering, it's not worth it. Nothing is worth venturing deeper into this accursed place. But Roderick barely heard him. He was thinking of his wife, of his daughters, of the debts that crushed his family, of the dreams that had brought him here, of the voice that called his name. Show me your route, Roderick heard himself say, and tell me exactly where we're going. Melara's laugh echoed off the black stones, and somewhere in the distance a sound like wings beat against the perpetual twilight. The inn, if it could be called such, squatted in the heart of Asshai, like a tumor in black flesh. Roderick sat in a corner booth, nursing a cup of wine that tasted of smoke and something else he could not identify. 3 days had passed since Melara's offer, 3 days of preparations and increasingly dire warnings from Bolaro. You've gone mad, his first mate had said that morning. The shadow has taken your wits. Perhaps he was right. But the dragon egg sat heavy in Roderick's cabin, wrapped in its black silk, and when he held it, he could feel warmth pulsing beneath the stone. Real, valuable, worth the risk, or so he told himself. The inn's common room was half empty, populated by figures who sat alone in shadows, faces hidden by hoods or masks, or simply angled away from the light. No one spoke above a whisper. No one made eye contact. The serving girl, an Ibanese woman with ritual scars across her cheeks, moved like a ghost, setting down cups and plates without a word. Roderick had chosen this place, the House of Shades, because Malara had told him to. "We will gather there," she had said, "those who will accompany us into the deeper shadow." He did not like the sound of deeper shadow, but he had agreed nonetheless. The door opened, letting in a gust of wind that smelled of ash and something sweeter, like incense burned in a tomb. A man entered, broad-shouldered, scarred, wearing the practical leathers of a sellsword. His skin was the deep brown of southern Essos, and his eyes, when they found Roderick, were hard as flint. "You are Faring," the man said, not a question. His accent marked him as Volantint, old blood. "I am Kavo. I have sailed with Malara before." "Sailed where?" Roderick asked. "Places without names." Kavo sat without invitation, his hand never straying far from the sword at his hip. "She told you what she seeks?" "She told me enough." "Then she told you nothing." Kavo leaned forward. "Malara seeks Staigai, the corpse city, the place even shadowbinders fear to tread." Roderick's blood chilled. He had heard the name in Qarth, spoken in the same tones men used for the Grey Waste or the land of always winter. Staigai was legend, nightmare, a city so deep in the Shadowlands that even the maps showed only blank space and warnings written in Old Valyrian. "Here be damnation." She never mentioned. "Of course not. If she had, would you have agreed?" Kavo's smile was bitter. "But you will go anyway. The shadow touched always do. I see it in your eyes. The same look she had when I met her in Volantis 5 years ago. The same look I had when I first heard the calling." "What calling?" Roderick demanded. "Everyone keeps speaking of this calling, but no one explains." "Because it cannot be explained." A new voice, feminine and strange. A woman approached their table, moving with an odd gliding gait. She was Jogosnai, her face tattooed with swirling patterns, her hair bound in dozens of small braids decorated with bone charms. The calling is the shadow reaching out, testing, tasting. Some hear it and flee. Others hear it and come. We are the others. She sat without asking, her dark eyes fixed on Roderick with unsettling intensity. "I am Inara. I have seen the paths we must walk, in dreams, in visions, in the patterns of smoke and blood." "A woods witch," Kavo muttered. "Perfect. We sail into darkness with a mad woman for a guide." "Better mad and alive than sane and dead," Inara replied, her voice sing-song. "The shadow respects madness. It knows we are already broken, already touched. It is the sane ones who shatter." Before Roderick could respond, a fourth figure emerged from the shadows. Literally, it seemed, as if the darkness itself had birthed him. The man wore robes of deepest black, and his face was hidden behind a smooth obsidian mask that reflected nothing. Around his neck hung a symbol Roderick did not recognize. A three-headed goat, each head screaming silently. "The black goat of Qohor," Kavo breathed, making a warding sign. "Seven hells, Malara, what have you summoned?" The priest said nothing. He simply stood at the edge of their table, utterly still, as if he were not truly present at all. "He does not speak." Malara's voice came from behind Roderick, making him start. She had appeared without sound, her red mask catching the dim light. "But he will be useful. The Black Goat's priests know paths through places where paths should not exist." She sat at the head of the table, completing their circle. 5 of them now, brought together by gods knew what purpose. "We leave tomorrow at moonrise," Malara announced. "The shadow is thinnest then, easiest to traverse. We will follow the ash upstream, beyond where the maps end. Quavo and the priest will handle protection. and Ara will guide us through the worst of the ruins. And you, Captain Faring, will ensure we have the supplies and transport to survive. How long? Roderick asked. How long will this journey take? Malara tilted her masked head. Time moves strangely in the deep shadow. We may be gone for weeks. We may return the same day we left, or we may never return at all. Comforting, Kavo muttered. I do not deal in comfort, Malara replied. I deal in truth. And the truth is this. Stygi holds secrets older than Valyria, older than the Long Night, older perhaps than humanity itself. I mean to learn them. You may come for gold, for glory, for whatever reason the shadow has called you. I care not. But know this. What we find at Stygi will change us, or destroy us. There is no middle path. She stood. Gather your supplies. Nothing living. The shadow consumes life. Dried meat, preserved fruit, water from deep wells. Bring fire, not torches. They will not burn there, but glass candles if you can find them. Bring weapons that do not rust, for the air in Stygi corrupts steel. And bring whatever gods you pray to, though I warn you, they do not answer in the shadow. With that, she glided away, leaving the four of them in uncomfortable silence. Well, Kavo finally said, draining his cup, we are all going to die. The next day, Roderick walked the streets of Asshai, compiling their supplies. The city revealed itself slowly, like a corpse rolled over to show its maggot-riddled underside. He passed through the Street of Silk, where brothels operated behind doors marked with red lanterns. Through the Street of Dreams, where poppy milk and stranger drugs were sold openly in vials of colored glass. Through the Street of Stars, where astrologers and fortune-tellers whispered prophecies for silver. But it was the great market that truly unnerved him. The market sprawled across a vast plaza of black stone, hundreds of stalls selling goods from across the known world, and from places unknown. Roderick saw Carthine's silk next to Manas's preserved in amber, Yeti jade beside what looked like human bones carved into jewelry, Myrish lace sharing space with books bound in leather that was definitely not cowhide, and everywhere the sellers, shadowbinders in their red masks, priests of a dozen dark gods, merchants who looked almost normal until you noticed their eyes. Always wrong, always strange. Some had pupils like cats. Others had no pupils at all, just solid black orbs. One woman's eyes changed color as Roderick watched, cycling through red, green, violet, and back again. You need supplies, Westerosi, a voice called. An old man, hunched and wizened, his skin covered in tattoos that seemed to move when Roderick wasn't looking directly at them. For a journey into the deeper shadow, yes? I can see it written on you? How can you? Everyone can see it. The old man gestured around the market. The shadow touched glow differently, like candles about to gutter out. What do you need? Roderick listed his requirements, and the old man nodded, shuffling between stalls and returning with bundles wrapped in oilcloth. Dried fish from the Jade Sea, will not spoil. Hardtack from Korth, twice baked. Water from the deep wells of Asshai. Do not drink from the ash, never drink from the ash. And this? He produced a small glass candle, pale blue and already lit with a flame that did not flicker. For light in places where normal fire fails. How much? The old man named a price in gold dragons that made Roderick wince, but he paid it. As he gathered his purchases, he noticed something that had been nagging at him all day. The shadows, he said slowly, they're wrong. The old man smiled, showing teeth filed to points. Ah, you see it. Most take days to notice. Yes, the shadows in Asshai do not fall correctly. Watch. He held up his gnarled hand, and Roderick saw it clearly now. The man's shadow fell in 3 directions at once, despite there being only one source of light. In Asshai, shadows have opinions, the old man said. They do not always agree with their owners. Sometimes they move independently. Sometimes they stay when you go. Sometimes... He leaned close, his breath smelling of cloves and decay. They come back changed from the places they wander. Roderick stepped back, his skin crawling. You should leave, Westerosi. The old man continued, suddenly serious. Leave while your shadow still follows you. Leave while you still can. Whatever Melara has promised you, it is not worth what Stygi takes. You've been there. I have been to its threshold, only to its threshold, and I saw enough to know. Never go deeper. Stygi is not a city, not truly. It is a wound in the world, and it has never healed. Before Roderick could ask more, the old man shuffled away, disappearing into the crowd of the strange and the damned. That evening, Roderick returned to the Storm's Daughter to find Belero waiting at the gangplank, his face grim. I spoke to the other captains, his first mate said, without preamble. The ones whose ships are docked here. Do you know why they stay in Asshai, Captain? Why they do not venture deeper into the shadow? Superstition, Roderick tried. Survival. Belaro gripped his arm. I spoke to a captain from Karth who has sailed these waters for 20 years. He told me that ships do venture into the shadow. Sometimes. And sometimes they come back. Then what's the problem? They come back wrong. Belara's voice dropped to a whisper. He told me of a trading galley that sailed up the Ash 5 years ago. It returned 3 months later, but the crew had changed. They moved strangely. They spoke in synchrony. And their shadows. He swore to me, Captain. Their shadows moved against the light, reached toward people like grasping hands. Stories to frighten children. Are there any children in Asshai to frighten? Belaro shot back. Think, Captain. Why are there no children here? Why does nothing grow? Why does every person we pass look at us with either pity or hunger? Roderick had no answer. I am begging you, Belaro continued. One last time. Do not do this. Sell what cargo remains. Take the gold. We can be halfway to Korth by week's end. For a long moment, Roderick almost agreed. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to leave this cursed city, and never look back. But then he thought of the dragon egg warming in his cabin, of his debts, of the dreams that had brought him here, of the voice that whispered his name in the darkness. I'm going, he said quietly. You should stay. Keep the ship ready. If we don't return in a month, when you don't return. If we don't return, sail for Korth. Sell the ship if you must. Get the crew home. Belaro stared at him for a long time, then shook his head slowly. You're already lost, aren't you? The shadow has you. I can see it in your eyes. The same emptiness I've seen in every shadowbinder's gaze. He turned to walk away, then paused. That captain from Korth, he told me one more thing. He said the ships that return from the deep shadow, they always come back with fewer crew than they left with. And the crew they do have, they're never quite the same people who departed, as if something in the shadow replaced them. With that cheerful thought, Belaro left. Roderick stood alone on the deck, watching the black waters of the Ash flow past. The city loomed around him, ancient and malevolent, and above, the stars seemed fewer than they should be, as if the darkness itself was consuming them. In his cabin, the dragon egg pulsed with warmth, and in his dreams, something waited, patient and hungry. Moonrise came too quickly. The 5 of them gathered at a pier beyond the city proper, where the ash flowed from the true Shadowlands. Melara had procured a boat, flat-bottomed, narrow, made of that same black stone that formed Asshai itself. How does stone float? Roderick wondered aloud. It does not float, Melara replied. It simply refuses to sink. There is a difference. The boat held their supplies, their weapons, and the glass candle that burned with its steady, unflickering flame. The priest of the Black Goat was already aboard, sitting perfectly still in the prow, his obsidian mask reflecting the moon. Kavo arrived last, carrying weapons Roderick did not recognize. A sword of dark metal that seemed to drink light, a dagger with a hilt made of bone, and a whip with barbs that gleamed dully in the darkness. Artifacts, the sellsword explained, bought from a blood mage in the Street of Shadows, forged with unpleasant rituals, but they will not fail in Stygi. Inara was already in the boat, sitting cross-legged, her eyes closed. murmuring in the Jogosnai tongue. The bone charms in her hair clicked softly, a sound like distant laughter. Come, Captain, Malara said, extending a pale hand. Your destiny awaits. Roderick took her hand. It was cold, so cold, and stepped into the boat. The moment his foot touched the stone, he felt it. A pulling sensation, as if hooks had been set in his chest, drawing him forward. The calling, he realized. This was the calling everyone had spoken of, made manifest and undeniable. They pushed off from the pier, and the black waters of the ash carried them into darkness. Behind them, Asshai's lights faded. Ahead, the Shadowlands opened like a mouth, and a Roderick Faring sailed into it willingly, 3 dragon eggs and 30 pieces of silver weighing heavy in his pack, while his shadow began, just barely, to move independently of his body. The sun never truly rose. 3 days they had traveled up the ash, or was it 3? Time felt slippery here, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. Roderick would look away from the sky for what felt like moments, only to find the dim twilight had shifted, the weak sun having moved in ways that defied the natural order. Sometimes it seemed to move backward. Once, he could have sworn there were 2 suns, pale and sickly, hanging low on opposite horizons. Do not try to measure time here, Malara had warned on the first day. The shadow has its own rhythms. They are not ours. The boat glided up the ash without oars or sail, propelled by currents that should not exist. The river flowed downward, yet they moved against it effortlessly. Roderick had stopped questioning such impossibilities. In the Shadowlands, the natural laws of the world were suggestions, easily ignored. The landscape itself seemed designed by a mad god. To their left, the eastern bank rose in jagged cliffs of black stone, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Roderick had tried to study them on the second day, or what he thought was the second day, but Chavo had gripped his shoulder hard. Do not read them, the Sellsword had hissed. Those are not letters. They are instructions, commands, and you do not want to know what they command. To their right, the western bank sprawled in broken ruins. Cities, perhaps, or the remnants of civilizations so old they predated memory. The buildings were wrong, towers that twisted in spirals, bridges that connected to nothing, archways that opened onto solid stone. And everywhere, that same black material, sometimes mixed with other substances. Green glass that seemed organic, red crystal that pulsed faintly, metals that had no names. The gemstone emperors, Inara had said, staring at the ruins with her unsettling dark eyes. Yee-Ti legends speak of them. Rulers of an empire that fell before the long night, before Valyria, before the first men walked Westeros. They built with sorcery, not stone. Their cities were alive. What happened to them? Roderick had asked. They displeased their gods, or they became their gods. The stories disagree. Inara's bone charms clicked as she tilted her head. But something ended them, something that still hungers in the deep places. Now, on what Roderick thought might be the 4th day, they passed something that made even Malara fall silent. A dragon. It lay on the western bank, partially submerged in the black waters of the ash. Its bones were the size of castle walls, white as snow, picked clean by time and scavengers. But its skull, gods. Its skull was larger than the storm's daughter, jaws agape, eye sockets like caves. I did not know they grew so large, Roderick whispered. They did not. Malara's voice was tight. Not naturally, this dragon was changed, enhanced. The shadowbinders of old knew arts that even we have forgotten. They could make dragons larger, fiercer, longer lived. But the cost. She gestured to the ruins around them. This is the cost. As they passed the skeleton, Roderick saw movement in the shadows of its ribcage. Things skittered between the bones, creatures the size of dogs, scaled and multi-legged, with too many eyes. One emerged briefly into the pale light, and Roderick glimpsed a face that was almost human, before it retreated with a sound like chittering laughter. Basilisks, Kavo said, hand on his dark sword. But not the normal kind. These are shadow-touched. They say basilisk venom from the deep shadow can kill a man with a single drop. They say it can drive you mad before it kills you. They say many things, Malira interrupted. Most are true. The priest of the Black Goat, who had not moved or spoken since they departed Asshai, suddenly raised his hand. He pointed ahead, where the river curved around a massive outcropping of rock. He senses something, Malira said. A city, or what remains of one. As they rounded the bend, Roderick's breath caught. The city rose from both banks of the Ash, a sprawl of ruins that dwarfed anything they had yet seen. Towers reached toward the perpetual twilight sky. Some crumbled, others intact but empty as skulls. Bridges spanned the river at impossible angles, spiraling in geometric patterns that made Roderick's eyes water. And everywhere, carved into every surface, were those same painful symbols. We should stop here, Inara said abruptly. Make camp. The spirits are restless, but they have not yet noticed us. If we press on in darkness... She trailed off, shaking her head, making her bone charms click urgently. There is no darkness here, Malira countered. Only degrees of shadow. And that is worse. Inara's voice was flat. True darkness is empty. But shadow has substance. Shadow has teeth. For once, Malira did not argue. They guided the boat to the western bank, beaching it on a stretch of black sand that felt like ash beneath their boots. The sand was warm. Not comfortingly so, but with a fever heat that suggested something unwell. Kavo leapt out first, weapons drawn, scanning the ruins. I see no movement, but I feel watched. You are always watched in the shadow, Malira said, stepping lightly onto the shore. The question is what watches, and whether it hungers. They made camp in the shell of a building that might once have been a temple. The walls still stood, providing some shelter from the weak wind that blew constantly from the east, carrying the smell of smoke and something sweet and rotten. The glass candle provided their only light. Kavo had tried to start a normal fire, but the wood they'd brought from Asshai refused to catch. It simply absorbed the flame and went cold. I told you, Malira said. Normal fire does not burn here. The shadow consumes it. They ate in silence, dried fish and hardtack that tasted of nothing. Roderick's water ration had a faint, oily sheen, despite coming from Asshai's deep wells. He drank it anyway. Thirst in the shadow was apparently worse than tainted water. As the others made ready to sleep, though Roderick doubted true sleep was possible here, he wandered to the edge of their shelter, staring out at the ruined city. The priest followed him, moving with that same eerie silence. Can you speak? Roderick asked. Or is it forbidden? For a long moment, nothing. Then the priest reached up and removed his obsidian mask. Roderick wished he hadn't. The face beneath was human, technically, but it had been modified. Tattoos covered every inch of skin, including the eyelids. Not decorative tattoos, but the same painful symbols carved into the ruins. Where the man's mouth should have been was a mass of scar tissue, his lips sewn shut with black thread that seemed to writhe in the candlelight. The priest touched his throat, then made a cutting gesture. They took your voice, Roderick realized. The Black Goat's priests sacrificed their speech. The priest nodded, then pointed to Roderick, then to his own chest, then made a gesture like something breaking. I don't understand, but the priest simply replaced his mask and glided away, leaving Roderick alone with his confusion. He was about to return to the others when he heard it, singing. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A woman's voice, high and sweet, singing in a language Roderick did not recognize. The melody was beautiful, achingly so, and it seemed to call to something deep within him. Do not listen. Inara appeared beside him, moving with surprising stealth for someone hung with bone charms. That is not singing, not truly. What is it? A lure. There are things in the shadow that feed on the living. Some hunt with fang and claw. Others hunt with beauty. Her tattooed face was grim in the candlelight. In my homeland, we have a saying, Beauty in the wrong place is death wearing jewelry. The singing continued, growing louder, closer. Other voices joined it, harmonizing in ways that should not be possible, creating chords that made Roderick's teeth ache. Everyone inside, Cavo commanded, his sword drawn. Now! They retreated deeper into the temple ruins, forming a circle around the glass candle. Malara drew symbols in the ash with her pale fingers, muttering in a language that predated common tongue, predated High Valyrian, predated perhaps language itself. The singing reached the threshold of their shelter and stopped. In the silence that followed, Roderick heard breathing, dozens of breaths perfectly synchronized, coming from just beyond the crumbled doorway. He could see nothing in the darkness beyond their candlelight, but he felt presences, many presences, waiting. They cannot enter, Malara said softly. The wards will hold, but we must not sleep. If you sleep, you may wake. Changed. The shadow takes what it wants from the sleeping. How long? Cavo asked. Until dawn, or what passes for dawn here. And how long is that? Malara's masked face turned toward him. I do not know. Hours, days, the shadow measures time and suffering, not minutes. So they waited. 5 people who were almost strangers, bound together by greed and calling and desperation. The breathing beyond the doorway never ceased. Once, something scratched at the stones. Long, slow drags like fingernails on slate. Once, a voice that was almost Bellerose called Roderick's name. Once, something laughed, a sound like breaking glass and dying birds. To keep his mind from breaking, Roderick forced himself to speak. Why? He asked Malara. Why do you seek Stigai? What could possibly be worth this? For a long time she did not answer. Then slowly she reached up and removed her red mask. Roderick had expected something horrible beneath. Instead, he saw a woman's face, beautiful in the conventional sense. High cheekbones, full lips, dark eyes. She could not have been more than 30 years old. I am dying, she said simply. This body has perhaps a year left. 2, if I am fortunate. I have studied shadow magic for 20 years, learned arts that would make kings weep with envy, but I cannot stop time. I cannot halt death. She paused, staring at the glass candle's flame. In Stigai, there is a temple. In that temple, there is knowledge. The shadow binders of the Gemstone Emperor era knew how to transcend flesh, how to exist beyond death, how to become shadow itself, eternal and unchanging. You want to become like them? Cavo's voice was horrified. Like the things outside? I want to be, Malara said fiercely. Not to rot in the ground, not to be forgotten. I want to exist, Cavo. Forever. Is that so terrible a desire? Yes, Anara said softly, because existence without change is not life. It is imprisonment. The things outside, they existed before the long night. They have existed for 10,000 years, perhaps longer, but they are not alive. They are echoes, shadows of what once lived. Is that what you wish to become? Malara's face hardened. Better an eternal echo than nothing at all. Before anyone could respond, the breathing stopped. Complete silence fell. More terrifying than the sounds had been. Even the constant wind had ceased. They are gone, the priest's hand signed. Roderick had learned this much from watching him. No, they have been called away. Called by what? Roderick demanded. The priest pointed east, toward the deeper shadow. Something greater, Malara said, replacing her mask. Something that hungers more than they do. As if in answer, a sound rolled across the ruins. Low, deep, a vibration felt in the bones rather than heard. It came from somewhere far upriver, from the heart of the Shadowlands. It sounded like a word, spoken in a voice too vast to be human. It sounded like a name. It sounded like home. Dawn, or what passed for it, came eventually. The weak sun dragged itself above the horizon, providing no real warmth or comfort. They broke camp quickly, eager to leave the ruined city. As they pushed the boat back into the ash, Roderick noticed something he'd missed the night before. On the far bank, partially hidden by fallen stones, was a ship, or the remains of one. It was Westerosian design, unmistakably so. The broken mast still showed traces of paint, a kraken, the sigil of House Greyjoy. Ironborn, Kavo observed. Years old by the look of it. A raiding party that sailed too far east? Or were called, Inara said quietly. Roderick stared at the wreck as they drifted past. How many other ships had come here? How many other fools had heard the calling and followed it into damnation? And how many had ever returned? They continued upriver, and the landscape grew stranger still. Trees appeared, if they could be called trees. Black trunks with red leaves that seemed to bleed when the wind touched them. Plants with translucent flesh through which dark fluids pumped. Flowers that opened and closed like mouths, releasing spores that sparkled in the dim light. Ghost grass, Malara said, gesturing to a field of pale white stalks that grew along the riverbank. The Dothraki believe it will one day cover the world. They are not entirely wrong. Ghost grass grows in places where the barrier between life and death is thin. It feeds on both. In another 1,000 years, it may cover the Shadowlands entirely. And then? Roderick asked. And then it spreads. First to Yiti, then to Karth, then west. Always west, consuming as it goes. Until all the world is shadow. Cheerful thought, Kavo muttered. But as the day wore on, or the twilight shifted, or time did whatever it did here, Roderick found himself dwelling on those words. What if the shadow was not contained? What if it spread slowly but inevitably like rot in wood? What if Westeros itself would one day look like this? Broken cities, twisted life, eternal twilight. As if sensing his thoughts, Inara spoke. The shadow grows, she said. Always. It grew during the long night. It grew after Valeria's doom. It grows even now, inches per year, but growing nonetheless. The Maesters of Westeros do not know this. The wise men of Essos pretend not to know. But the Shadowlands were once green lands. Once people lived here, cities thrived, children played. What happened? Roderick asked, though he feared the answer. Someone opened a door, Inara said simply, and they could not close it. That night, or what might have been night, they made camp again, this time in a grove of those bleeding trees. The priest drew wards in the soil, while Malara prepared something in a small brass bowl, adding herbs and powders that sizzled and sparked. Dream wine, she explained, to keep the nightmares at bay. We are close now, close to Stygai. The closer we get, the more active the dreams become. She poured the mixture into 5 cups, dark liquid that smelled of poppies and darkness. Drink, she commanded, all of you. Without it, your dreams will drive you mad. Roderick drank. The liquid was bitter beyond belief, coating his tongue with a taste like ashes and old blood. But moments later, a calm descended over him, heavy and complete. He lay down on the black sand, staring up at stars that seemed fewer each night, and felt consciousness slip away. He dreamed, but the dreams were muted, distant, as if viewed through clouded glass. He saw Stygai, still far ahead, its towers of cyclopean black stone rising impossibly high. He saw something moving in those towers, massive and patient. He saw his own face reflected in black water, and watched as his reflection smiled while he did not. And he heard the voice again, the one from all his dreams, speaking his name in that ancient tongue. Roderick, Roderick, come home. When he woke, the priest was gone. His robes lay in a neat pile beside his sleeping space, folded carefully. His obsidian mask rested atop them. But the man himself had vanished as if he'd never existed. He heard the calling, Malara said, her voice showing the first crack of emotion Roderick had heard. Stronger than the rest of us, he walked into the shadow. We have to find him, Roderick insisted. We will not. Malara's finality was absolute. He is gone, already changed. If we encounter him again, he will not be our companion. He will be something else. Kavo stood at the edge of their camp, staring into the darkness between the trees. I saw him go. He walked, eagerly, as if he recognized someone in the dark, as if he were going to meet an old friend. Perhaps he was, Inara said softly, her bone charms clicking one final time. Perhaps the shadow promises us all what we most desire, and delivers it in ways we cannot imagine. 4 now, instead of 5. They boarded the boat in silence and continued into the heart of the Shadowlands. And ahead, impossibly distant yet somehow close, Stygi waited. Roderick knew they had arrived before he saw it. The air changed. Not temperature. The Shadowlands maintained their constant fever warmth, but density. Each breath felt like inhaling water, thick and resistant. His lungs worked harder for less air, and a pressure built behind his eyes, as if the very atmosphere was trying to push him back. The boundary, Malara said, her masked face turned forward, between the shadow and the deep shadow, between the dangerous and the damned. The ash had narrowed to barely 20 feet across, its black waters sluggish now, almost gelatinous. Things moved beneath the surface, large things, creating ripples that spread outward in perfect geometric patterns that hurt to follow with the eye. "We should turn back," Cavo said, and there was no shame in his voice, only the flat pragmatism of a man who knew when odds were hopeless. "Whatever coin we were promised, whatever glory awaits, it is not worth this." "Then swim back," Malara replied. "The boat goes forward." Inara said nothing. She had not spoken since they had found the priest's robes. Her dark eyes were distant, unfocused, and her lips moved constantly in silent prayer or prophecy. The bone charms in her hair had stopped clicking. They hung motionless despite the wind, as if even they feared what lay ahead. Then Roderick saw it. Stygi. The word city failed utterly to describe what rose before them. It was too vast, too ancient, too wrong to be contained by human language. The structures, buildings, towers, temples, monuments defied geometry. They were made of the same black stone as everything in the shadow, but here it was worked to impossible perfection. Surfaces were so smooth they reflected nothing, absorbing light like wounds absorb blood. The architecture was cyclopean, built for beings of enormous size, or perhaps beings to whom size held no meaning. The smallest doorway Roderick could see would have accommodated 3 war elephants walking abreast. The towers reached upward until they vanished into the perpetual haze, and Roderick could not tell if they actually ended or simply became too thin to perceive. Bridges connected structure to structure at dizzying heights, spanning distances that should have been impossible without support pillars. Yet the bridges held, carved from single pieces of stone, defying every law of engineering Roderick understood. And everywhere, carved into every surface, inscribed on every lintel and arch and foundation, were those symbols, the ones that hurt to read. But here they were not ancient and worn. Here they were fresh, deep, active. They seemed to pulse in the corner of Roderick's vision, rearranging themselves when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Gods," Cavo breathed. "What built this?" "Not gods," Malara said. "The gemstone emperors, or those who came before them. This city predates the long night. Perhaps it predates humanity itself. The Bloodstone Emperor, last of his line, is said to have practiced his darkest sorceries here. They say he opened gates that should never have been opened. They say he spoke with what lay beyond." "And where is he now?" Roderick asked. Malara pointed toward the city's heart, where a temple larger than all others dominated the skyline. "There, or what remains of him. If the legends are true, he achieved what I seek. Transcendence of flesh, existence beyond death. He became shadow itself." "And if he did not," Cavo pressed, "then he died screaming and his shade haunts this place, and we are all fools." Malara's laugh was brittle. "Does it matter? We have come too far to turn back." She was right, and they all knew it, not because of distance, though they were weeks from Asshai now, if time could still be measured in such units, but because the calling had them. Roderick felt it like hooks in his flesh, pulling him toward the city, toward its heart, towards something that waited there with the patience of stones. The boat glided to shore without any guidance from them, beaching itself on black sand that was not sand at all, but some kind of crystalline powder. When Roderick stepped onto it, it crunched beneath his boots and left no footprints. Instead, the substance flowed back together immediately as if the land itself rejected evidence of their passage. No one has set foot here in centuries, Malara said, surveying the city, and yet it is not abandoned. Can you feel it? The presence? Roderick could. The city was watching them. Not with eyes, nothing so simple, but with an awareness that permeated every stone, every shadow, every angle. They were insects that had crawled into a sleeping dragon's maw. The dragon had noticed. It simply had not yet decided whether to swallow. Stay close, Malara commanded, though it was hardly necessary. None of them wanted to be alone in this place. They moved into Steigai proper, and reality began to negotiate with itself. Distances refused to behave. A street that looked 50 yards long would take hours to traverse. A tower that appeared miles away would suddenly loom directly overhead. Roderick would turn his head, and the street behind them would be different. Still black stone, still empty, but arranged in new configurations, as if the city was rearranging itself when they weren't looking. Do not try to map it, Malara said. Steigai has no fixed geography. It exists in more than 3 dimensions. We move through it, but it also moves through us. That makes no sense, Kavo growled. Welcome to Steigai, where sense comes to die. They passed buildings that hurt to perceive, structures with too many angles, or not enough, doorways that seemed to lead inward and outward simultaneously, windows that showed not the interior of buildings but other places entirely. Roderick glimpsed what might have been Korth through one, Valyria through another, and something that looked like Winterfell, but subtly wrong, as if he were seeing it from inside a dream. Do not look too long at the windows. Inara spoke for the first time in hours, her voice hoarse. They show possibilities, other times, other worlds. Look too long and you forget which one is real. Evidence of previous visitors appeared as they penetrated deeper. A suit of Giscari armor, empty, propped against a wall, as if the wearer had simply evaporated. A shield bearing the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen, the metal untarnished despite obvious age. A skeleton in Yeti silks, the bones arranged in a perfect circle, the skull at the center facing upward with its jaw locked open in an eternal scream. How did they die? Roderick asked. They saw, Inara replied cryptically. The glass candle provided their only light, its pale blue flame steady and cold. But as they moved closer to the city's heart, other lights appeared. Phosphorescence leaked from cracks in the stone, colors that had no names. Not red, not blue, not any hue Roderick's eyes were designed to perceive. These lights cast shadows in impossible directions, and Roderick realized with creeping horror that his own shadow was behaving strangely. It no longer followed him exactly. It lagged slightly, as if reluctant, and its shape was subtly different, taller, thinner, with suggestions of additional limbs. Your shadows are changing, Kavo said, and Roderick saw it was true for all of them. The sellsword's shadow had grown spikes, Inara's shadow seemed to have wings, and Malara's shadow. Malara's shadow had multiple heads, writhing like serpents. It is beginning, Malara said, and she sounded pleased. The transformation, the transcendence. We are close now, so very close. They entered a vast plaza, its black stone floor polished to mirror perfection. In the plaza's center stood statues, dozens of them, carved from stone that was somehow blacker than black, absorbing even the strange lights that permeated Steigai. The statues depicted humanoid figures, but wrong, too tall. With joints in places, humans had no joints. Their faces were smooth, featureless except for mouths, open mouths, revealing throats that seemed to go down forever. Each statue was unique, positioned in poses of supplication or ecstasy or torment. Roderick could not tell which. The Seekers, Malara whispered. Those who came before. Those who achieved partial transcendence but could not complete the journey. They remain here, caught between flesh and shadow, stone and spirit, aware but unable to move, alive but unable to die. Gods have mercy, Kavo breathed. There are no gods here, Malara said, only shadows, and the things that cast them. As they crossed the plaza, Roderick felt the statue's attention shift. He could not say how he knew. They had no eyes, but he felt their awareness focus on his group, and he heard, faint as whispers, voices. Turn back, run, while you still have shadows to cast. It waits, it hungers, it remembers. We sought knowledge. We found only absence. The door, the door, the door must stay closed. Roderick stumbled. The voice is overwhelming. Kavo caught him, the sellsword's face pale as ash. I hear them too, Kavo said. They're begging us to leave. They are failures, Malara said dismissively. They lack the strength to complete what they began. We will not fail. She led them across the plaza, ignoring the increasing desperation of the stone voices. Inara followed in silence, her face blank, all her bone charms now hanging motionless as if weighted with invisible chains. Beyond the plaza rose the temple. It was obscene in its enormity. The structure dwarfed mountains. Its base could have contained Storm's End, the Red Keep, and Winterfell with room to spare. It rose in tiers, each level smaller than the last, creating a stepped pyramid that climbed toward the twilight sky. But the proportions were wrong. Each tier was too tall, the steps between them too steep for human legs. And at its apex, barely visible through the haze, something moved. Not wind, not birds. Something vast and patient, coiled at the temple's crown like a serpent around an egg. The entrance had no door. It was simply an opening. A mouth, Roderick thought, trying not to think it. 20 feet wide. And 40 tall. Darkness pooled within, absolute and hungry. The strange lights of Stygi did not penetrate it. Even the glass candle's flame seemed dimmer at the threshold. There, Malara said, her voice trembling with emotion for the first time. The Temple of the Void, the seat of the Bloodstone Emperor's power, the place where flesh becomes shadow. She started forward, but Kavo grabbed her arm. Wait, something is wrong. Everything is wrong, you fool. This entire cursed place is... No, Kavo pointed. Look at the ground. Roderick looked. The black sand, or crystalline powder, or whatever it was, showed disturbances. Not footprints exactly, but impressions. Recent ones. Something had entered the temple. Something large. We are not alone, Inara said, her voice distant. We have never been alone. The city watches. The city breathes. The city is, and it knows we have come. Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the temple's mouth. It wore the black robes of the priest of the Black Goat. It wore his obsidian mask. But it was not him. Not anymore. The figure moved wrong. Its joints bent in directions human joints should not bend. Its head turned completely around, the mask facing them while the body still pointed inward. And when it spoke, the voice came not from where its mouth should be, but from everywhere at once, reverberating off the black stones. Come, it said in the priest's voice, but layered with others, dozens, hundreds, speaking in perfect unison. The shadow welcomes you. The shadow has waited so long, so very long. The figure's hands rose, and Roderick saw they had too many fingers now, elongated and jointed like spider legs. The priest beckoned. Come, see, know, become. Gods, Kavo whispered, drawing his shadow-forged sword. What have they done to him? Nothing, Malara said, and she was smiling beneath her mask. Roderick could hear it in her voice. They have done nothing. They have simply revealed what was always there. We are all shadows, wearing flesh. Here, in Stygi, the flesh falls away. The truth emerges. She stepped toward the temple entrance. Malara, no. Roderick reached for her. She whirled, faster than should be possible, and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was ice cold and impossibly strong. "Do not presume to stop me, Captain. I have come too far, sacrificed too much. The knowledge is within, the secret of eternal existence, the answer to death itself." "At what cost?" Kavo demanded. "Any cost." Malara released Roderick and continued toward the temple. "Any cost is worth escaping the grave." The priest thing stepped aside, its body contorting in ways that made Roderick's stomach heave. Malara entered the darkness without hesitation and vanished, as if the shadows had swallowed her whole. "She is lost," Inara said softly. "Lost to the calling, lost to the hunger. We should run, now, while we still remember what running is." But Roderick found himself moving forward, not because he wanted to. Gods! Every fiber of his being screamed to flee, but because the hooks were in him, pulling, dragging, compelling. The calling had become a physical force, and he was powerless against it. "Captain!" Kavo grabbed him. "Fight it. Whatever compulsion this place exerts, you must—" A scream echoed from within the temple, Malara's scream. But it was wrong, too long, too many octaves, as if her voice was being stretched across dimensions. The scream ended abruptly, and then her laughter replaced it. Mad, exultant laughter that echoed and never quite stopped. "She found it," Inara whispered. "She found what she sought. Gods and shadows help us all, she found it." The priest thing turned its masked face toward them, and in the smooth obsidian, Roderick saw reflections that were not their own. He saw himself, but aged to decrepitude. He saw Kavo with his throat cut. He saw Inara hanging from invisible strings like a puppet. And he saw something else, a shape moving in the darkness behind the priest thing. Something vast, something that should not exist, something that had been waiting in the temple of the void since before humanity drew breath. "Run!" Roderick said. They ran, back across the plaza of screaming statues, through streets that rearranged themselves, trying to lead them deeper instead of out, past buildings that reached for them with angles like grasping fingers. The glass candle's light flickered wildly, threatening to extinguish, and without it they would be lost in absolute darkness. Behind them, Malara's laughter followed, growing louder, multiplying, as if 1,000 voices had learned to laugh in unison, and beneath the laughter, a sound like breathing. Not human breathing, the breathing of a city that had pretended to sleep, but was now, finally, fully awake. They burst from a side street into what might have been the plaza they'd first entered, or might have been somewhere else entirely. The boat was there, impossibly, waiting on the black sand. They did not question it. They threw themselves into the boat, and it began moving immediately, pulled by currents that flowed against all nature. As Asshai-by receded behind them, or seemed to, though distance here meant nothing, Roderick looked back one final time. The temple loomed against the twilight sky. At its apex, something uncoiled, spreading limbs or wings or concepts that had no physical form. And in the entrance, silhouetted against the absolute darkness, stood 2 figures now. Malara and the priest, both facing outward, both waiting, both casting shadows that were darker than the darkness they stood within. "She will never leave," Inara said, staring back at the corpse city. "She has become what she sought, eternal, unchanging, beyond death. She exists now as shadow exists, forever and never, always and nowhere." "Is that not what she wanted?" Kavo asked. "Perhaps." Inara's bone charms began clicking again, faintly, as distance grew between them and Stigai. But existence without change is not life. It is not even death. It is absence, and absence is the only thing worse than ending. The boat carried them away from the corpse city, back toward Asshai, back toward something resembling sanity. But Roderick knew, with cold certainty, that they were not leaving unchanged. He looked down at his shadow, cast by the glass candle's light. It did not quite match his movements anymore, and when he looked away, he could have sworn it smiled. They traveled in silence for what might have been days. The boat glided down the ash without guidance, moving faster than it had on the journey upriver, as if even the cursed waters wanted them gone from the deep shadow. The landscape passed in a blur of twisted ruins and bleeding trees, but Roderick barely saw it. His mind remained trapped in that moment at the temple's threshold, watching Melara vanish into darkness that consumed light itself. He should have stopped her, should have dragged her back to the boat by force if necessary. But the calling had paralyzed him, and now she was lost, or transformed, or transcended, or whatever word could possibly describe what happened to those who entered the Temple of the Void and did not return. Kavo sat in the boat's stern, his shadow-forged sword across his knees, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The sellsword had not spoken since they fled Stygai. His face was haggard, aged by more than the passage of time. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. Inara occupied the prow, her body perfectly still, her tattooed face blank. The bone charms in her hair clicked occasionally, responding to breezes Roderick could not feel. She had not eaten since they left the corpse city, had not drunk, had barely breathed. She simply stared ahead, as if watching something invisible approach from the distant gloom. "We need to stop," Roderick finally said, his voice rough from disuse. "Make camp. Rest." "There is no rest in the shadow," Inara replied, without looking at him. "But we may stop. Yes, we should stop, before it is too late." "Before what is too late?" She did not answer. They beached the boat at a relatively clear stretch of shoreline, beneath the skeletal remains of what might once have been a bridge. The structure's bones, if stone could have bones, arched overhead, providing a false sense of shelter. Roderick knew better now. There was no shelter in the Shadowlands, no safety, only degrees of exposure. Kavo built their camp in mechanical silence, arranging their diminished supplies with practiced efficiency. The glass candle provided their light, its blue flame steady and cold. Normal fire remained impossible. Kavo had tried again, more out of desperation than hope, but the wood they carried simply refused to burn. "We should eat," Roderick said, though the thought of food made his stomach turn. "Keep our strength up." "For what?" Kavo's laugh was bitter. "Captain, look at us. We have left." One companion sown silent and transformed in Stygai. Another walks willingly into shadow and madness. We three remain, but for how long? How long before the calling takes us too? "It will not take me," Roderick said, with more confidence than he felt. "No?" Kavo gestured at Roderick's shadow, cast long and distorted by the candle's light. "Look at it, Captain. Truly look. Does it move as you move? Does it fall as shadows should fall?" Roderick looked. His shadow was wrong. He had known this since leaving Stygai, but had not allowed himself to examine it closely. The proportions were subtly off, the head too large, the arms too long, and when he moved his hand there was a delay, infinitesimal, but present, before the shadow followed. "It is learning," Inara said, still staring into the darkness beyond their camp. "Your shadow is learning to be you. Soon it will know you better than you know yourself." And then she trailed off. "And then what?" Roderick demanded. "And then you will not be sure which is which, the flesh or the shadow, the real or the reflection." She finally turned to face them, and her eyes were black, completely black, no whites remaining. "It has already begun in me. I see with shadow eyes now. I hear shadow whispers. The spirits I once communed with, they flee from me. They know I am becoming something else." "Gods," Kavo breathed. "We need to reach Asshai, find healers, shadowbinders who can reverse." "There is no reversal." Inara's voice was patient, almost kind. "We went too deep, stayed too long, breathed the air of Stygai. We are marked now, changed. The shadow has tasted us, and it does not release what it has tasted." Roderick's hands clenched into fists. "I will not accept that. We will reach Asshai. We will find a way. There is always a way." "Is there?" Inara tilted her head, and the movement was too fluid, too serpentine. "Tell me, Captain, Why did you come here? What called you across half the world to this place of damnation? For gold, to clear my family's debts, to lies. Inara's black eyes fixed on him. Pretty lies you told yourself? But the truth, Captain? The truth is you came because you heard your name spoken in dreams, because something in the shadow knew you, recognized you, called you home. That's not... I saw it in Stygai, Inara continued, relentless. In the plaza of statues, in their stone mouths, prophecy written in absence and void. You have been here before, Roderick Faring. Not in this life, perhaps, but your shadow has walked these streets. Your shadow remembers. You're mad, Roderick said, but his voice shook. Yes. Inara smiled, and her teeth seemed sharper than before. Quite mad. The shadow does that. But madness and truth are not opposites, Captain. Often they are the same thing, seen from different angles. Before Roderick could respond, a sound echoed across the broken landscape. Distant, but distinct. Singing. The same beautiful, terrible singing they had heard on their journey. Upriver, but closer now. Much closer. They followed us, Kavo said, rising with his sword drawn. The things from the ruins. They followed us from Stygai. No, Inara said. They were always here, waiting. The shadow is patient. It does not chase. It simply waits for you to stop running. The singing grew louder, resolving into multiple voices, harmonizing in ways that should not be possible. Roderick could almost understand the words. They were in no language he knew, yet meaning leaked through nonetheless. Welcome. Home. Surrender. Peace. Do not listen, Kavo commanded, pressing his hands against his ears. Block it out. It is a lure, a trap. But Roderick found he could not stop listening. The song was too beautiful, too perfect. It promised everything he had ever wanted. Peace, rest, an end to struggling, an end to debt and duty and the crushing weight of expectations. All he had to do was walk into the darkness. Just a few steps. So easy, so simple. He took a step forward. Captain! Kavo grabbed his arm. Fight it! But Roderick barely felt the grip. The song was inside him now, resonating in his bones, his blood, his shadow. And beneath the song, another sound, a voice he recognized. Roderick, come to me. See what I have become. Melara. She emerged from the darkness beyond their candlelight, and Roderick's breath caught. She no longer wore her red mask. She needed no mask, for her face had become a mask, smooth, porcelain. Features perfect but somehow wrong, as if carved by someone who had never truly seen a human face. She wore the same robes, but they moved independently of any breeze, rippling and flowing like water. And her shadow, God's, her shadow, it had multiplied. Dozens of shadows spread from her feet, each moving independently, each reaching toward them like grasping fingers. I told you I would find the answer, Melara said, her voice echoing as if spoken in a vast chamber. I told you I would transcend, and I have. Oh, Roderick, I have. What did they do to you? Roderick whispered. They did nothing. I did this. I opened myself to the shadow. I let it in. I let it fill all the hollow places, all the spaces between flesh and bone, all the gaps where fear and doubt lived. And now, she spread her arms, and her shadow fingers stretched impossibly wide. Now I am eternal, beyond flesh, beyond death, beyond time itself. You are a monster, Kavo said flatly. Melara's porcelain face turned towards him, and though she had no pupils, Roderick felt the weight of her gaze. Monster. Shadowbinder. God. What are these but words? Her laugh was wind chimes and breaking glass. I offered you transcendence, sellsword. The opportunity to become more than meat that rots. You refused. You cling to your mortality like a drowning man clings to driftwood. But the ocean always wins in the end. Why did you follow us? Roderick forced himself to ask. Why not stay in your temple, your corpse city? Because you are mine, Melara said simply. I brought you here. I called you. 3 dragon eggs I promised, and I delivered. But the true price was always going to be you, your shadow, your essence. The shadow hungers, Roderick. It is always hungry. And I am its servant now, its priest, its prophet. She glided closer, and Roderick saw that her feet did not quite touch the ground. She floated, suspended by her multiplying shadows, borne aloft by darkness itself. Come with me, she urged, extending a pale hand. Return to Steigai. Enter the temple of the void. You felt the calling. You know it speaks truth. You belong there, in the darkness, in the shadow. You always have. For a terrible moment, Roderick almost took her hand. The calling pulled at him, stronger than ever, promising peace and purpose, and an end to questioning. But then Kavo stepped between them, his dark sword raised. He goes nowhere with you, witch. Malara's porcelain face tilted, considering the sellsword. You would fight me. You, with your little sword and your mortal flesh. I am shadow now. I cannot be cut. I cannot bleed. I cannot die. Then you cannot be alive either, Kavo said. And I would rather live one more day than exist forever as you do, a hollow thing, a puppet dancing on strings made of darkness. For the first time, something like emotion flickered across Malara's perfect face. Anger, or perhaps hurt. The porcelain cracked slightly, revealing darkness beneath. You know nothing of what I have become, the power I wield, the secrets I have learned. In the Temple of the Void, I saw everything, every timeline, every possibility, every path the world might take. I saw Westeros fall to ice. I saw Essos drown in blood. I saw dragons return and cities burn. I saw it all, Kavo, all of it, and I am beyond it now, beyond consequence, beyond fate. Then why? Inara spoke softly. Do you still need us? Malara's head snapped toward the Jogosnai woman. The movement too fast, too sharp. You see it too, Inara continued, her black eyes meeting Malara's absent ones. The truth beneath the transcendence. You are not free, Shadowbinder. You are bound to Steigai, bound to the temple, bound to whatever you found in the darkness. You call yourself eternal, but you are a prisoner, a beautiful, terrible prisoner. Lies, Malara hissed, but her voice was less certain now. Is it? Inara stood, moving with that new fluid grace that marked her changing. Then leave. Walk away from Steigai. Travel west with us. Prove you are free. Malara said nothing. Her multiplying shadows writhed and coiled, agitated. You cannot, Inara said with finality. The shadow gave you existence beyond death, yes, but it took your freedom in exchange. You are its creature now, its tool, and when you have served your purpose, when you have brought enough victims to feed its hunger, it will discard you as it has discarded all the others. No, Malara whispered, and the word held genuine fear. No, I chose this. I chose... Did you? Inara stepped closer to the thing that had been Malara. Or did the shadow choose you? Did it whisper in your dreams as it whispered in the captain's? Did it show you visions of power and eternity? Did it promise you everything you desired while hiding the cost? Malara's porcelain face cracked further, darkness leaking through like blood from wounds. I chose, but the certainty was gone from her voice. Go back to your temple, Inara said, not unkindly. Go back to your darkness. You are already lost, but we are not. Not yet. For a long moment Malara stood frozen, her shadows coiling and uncoiling. Then she screamed, a sound that was every scream Roderick had ever heard, layered and multiplied, until it became something beyond human comprehension. The sound shattered the night. The glass candle's flame flickered wildly. The very stones beneath their feet vibrated with the force of her anguish. And then she was gone, simply gone, as if she had never been there at all. Only her scream remained, echoing across the broken landscape, slowly fading into the perpetual twilight. Kavo lowered his sword, his hands shaking. What did you do? I showed her the truth, Inara said quietly. The one thing the shadow cannot abide, the truth of its own nature. It offers transcendence but delivers imprisonment. It promises eternity but provides only absence. Malar saw this, and the seeing broke her. Will she return? Roderick asked. Perhaps, perhaps not. The shadow is fickle, but we cannot remain here. We must reach Asshai. Tonight, now, before the other things come. What other things? Kavo demanded. Inera pointed into the darkness beyond their camp. Shapes moved there, dozens of them, hundreds perhaps. Some walked upright, others crawled. Still others seemed to flow like liquid shadow given form. All moved toward them with terrible patience, drawn by Malara's scream, by the glass candle's light, by the presence of living flesh in this realm of death. The Seekers, Inara whispered. Those who came before, those who entered the temple and emerged changed. They hunt in packs now, these shadow things, and they are very, very hungry. Boat, Kavo said flatly. Now. They scrambled into the vessel, abandoning most of their supplies. The glass candle came with them. Without it, they would be blind. The boat began moving immediately, faster than before, as if it too sensed the approaching danger. Behind them, the shapes reached their abandoned camp. Roderick watched in horror as they swarmed over it, tearing through their supplies with shadow claws, fighting over scraps of food, pieces of cloth, anything that held a trace of living warmth. And then they looked up, as one. Dozens of featureless faces turned toward the fleeing boat, and they followed. They came across the water, not swimming, not flying, but simply moving through the substance of reality, as if it were a suggestion rather than a law. They flowed over the black surface of the ash, gaining speed, reaching out with hands that had too many fingers. Faster, Kavo urged the boat, though it had no oars to row, no sail to catch wind. The boat accelerated, moving faster than any vessel Roderick had ever sailed. The shoreline blurred. The ruins became streaks of darkness. But still the shadow things followed, tireless, patient, hungry. They will follow us to Asshai, Inara said. They will follow us into the city. They have been waiting for an opportunity to escape the deep shadow, and we have provided it. Then what do we do? Roderick demanded. Inara was silent for a long moment. Then she stood, balancing perfectly in the racing boat, and began unwinding the bone charms from her hair. What are you doing? Kavo asked. Paying a price. Inara's black eyes were calm. Every crossing requires a toll. The shadow has taken one of us already. It will take another before we reach Asshai. Better I choose my fate than let it choose for me. No, Roderick said, understanding. There has to be another way? There is not. Inara gathered all her bone charms in her hands. These are the bones of my ancestors. They have protected me, guided me, warned me. Now they will buy your passage. She cast the charms into the ash, and they floated for a moment on the black water before sinking. As each one vanished, Inara gasped, as if a piece of her soul was being torn away. Spirits of earth and sky, she chanted in the Jogosnai tongue. Spirits of grassland and mountain, I give you my name. I give you my bones. I give you my shadow. Accept this offering. Delay them, just for a moment, just long enough. The pursuing shadow things slowed. They converged on the spot where the bone charms had sunk, drawn to the spiritual energy Inara had released. They fought over it, tearing at the water, at each other, momentarily distracted from their prey. It bought them seconds, perhaps a minute. It is not enough, Inara said. The charms alone are not enough. The price must be greater. Before anyone could stop her, she stepped to the edge of the boat. Remember me, she said, her black eyes meeting Roderick's. Remember that I chose this, that I walked willingly into the shadow, so that others might escape. And she jumped. She hit the water without a splash, disappearing beneath the black surface as if the ash had been waiting to receive her. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the water erupted. Shadows burst from the ash. Inara's shadows, but transformed, empowered by her sacrifice. They were no longer mere absence of light, but active forces, entities unto themselves. They fell upon the pursuing shadow things with terrible fury, grappling, tearing, dragging them down into the black depths. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted only moments. Then the water stilled, and both Inara and her pursuers were gone, pulled down into whatever abyss waited beneath the ash. The boat raced on, now unhindered. Roderick and Cavo sat in stunned silence, neither able to speak. Two remained, 2 out of 5. And ahead, still far but growing closer, the lights of Asshai glimmered in the eternal twilight. But Roderick knew, with cold, terrible certainty, that reaching Asshai would not mean safety, because his shadow no longer followed him at all. It led. Asshai-by-the-Shadow rose from the gloom like a wound in the world that refused to heal. The boat carried them closer, and with each passing hour, if time could still be measured in hours, Roderick felt something within him loosening, like stitches coming undone, like a mask worn too long beginning to peel away. He looked at his hands in the glass candle's light and saw them clearly, yet somehow they seemed distant, as if they belonged to someone else. Cavo had not spoken since Inara's sacrifice. The sellsword sat rigid in the stern, his shadow-forged sword across his knees, staring at nothing, or perhaps at everything. His eyes had developed a distant quality, as if he were seeing through multiple layers of reality at once. "We're dying," Roderick said, his voice rough. It wasn't a question. "No." Cavo's response was immediate, flat. "We're changing. Death would be kinder." The black waters of the ash carried them past the ruins they had seen on the journey upriver. The skeletal dragon, the crashed iron-born ship, the bleeding trees. But now Roderick saw them differently. Not as remnants of the past, but as warnings. As prophecies written in bone and stone and twisted wood. This is what becomes of those who answer the calling. His shadow moved ahead of him now, cast forward by the glass candle despite all laws of light and physics. It was darker than his flesh, more solid somehow, as if his physical body were becoming the illusion, and the shadow the truth. "Tell me about Volantis," Roderick said suddenly, desperately needing to hear something human, something real. "Tell me about the world outside this cursed place." Cavo was silent for so long that Roderick thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, the sellsword spoke. "I was born in the shadow of the Black Wall. My mother was a slave, my father tiger who didn't acknowledge his bastards. I killed my first man at 12, joined a sellsword company at 15. I fought from Meereen to Pentos, bled in a dozen wars I didn't understand for lords I didn't respect." He paused. "I thought I had seen everything. Every cruelty man could devise, every horror war could produce. And now? Now I know I had seen nothing. War's honest, Captain. Men kill for land, gold, power. Terrible, yes, but comprehensible. This," he gestured at the shadowlands around them. "This is something else. This is hunger without purpose, existence without meaning. This is the universe showing us that humanity is an accident it regrets. You've become a philosopher. I've become a madman. There's little difference." Cavo's laugh was bitter. "Do you know what I realized in Stigai? When we stood before that temple and I felt it watching us?" "What?" "That we matter so very little. The shadow existed before the first humans drew breath. It will exist after the last human dies. It is patient, eternal, and we are mayflies buzzing around its edges, deluding ourselves that we matter." "Then why did you run?" Roderick demanded. "Why not let it take you, if we're so insignificant?" Cavo met his eyes, and for a moment Roderick saw the man he'd been before Stigai. Practical, cynical, but fundamentally human. "Because even mayflies fight to live," Cavo said softly. "Even knowing it's futile. It's what separates us from the shadows. We struggle. They simply are." The walls of Asshai appeared through the twilight haze, black and immense and somehow welcoming despite their alien construction. Ships dotted the docks, more than Roderick remembered, as if Asshai's population had increased in their absence. Or perhaps they'd been there all along, and he simply hadn't noticed. The boat beached itself on the same black sand where they had first departed, Roderick stepped onto the shore, his legs unsteady, and nearly fell. Kavo caught him, the Sellsword's grip solid and real. Can you walk? I don't know. Roderick looked down at his legs, at his shadow stretching before him into the city. I'm not sure what's carrying me anymore, my flesh or my shadow. They moved into Asshai proper, and immediately Roderick sensed a change. The city felt more active, more alive, or more properly, more filled with the mockery of life. Figures in red masks watched from doorways. Shadow binders glided through streets that rearranged themselves subtly when not directly observed, and everywhere shadows moved independently of their casters, conducting business of their own. We need help, Kavo said. A healer, a shadow binder who can reverse what's been done. There is no reversal. They both spun. An old man stood behind them, the same one who had sold Roderick supplies in the great market. His tattooed skin still seemed to writhe with living symbols, but now Roderick could read them. They were warnings, prophecies, obituaries for the still living. You returned, the old man said, his voice neither surprised nor pleased. Most do not, or rather most do not return as themselves. Help us, Roderick said. Please. We went to Stygai. We saw, I know what you saw. Everyone in Asshai knows. The shadow touched glow differently now, remember? You are marked, changed. The shadow has tasted you, and you carry its flavor. Can it be undone? Kavo demanded. The old man studied them with eyes that had seen too much and remembered more than was healthy. Undone? No. Slowed, perhaps. Delayed. But the transformation has begun. You breathed the air of the corpse city. You walked its streets. You stood before the temple of the void and heard it call your names. You are becoming shadows, gentlemen. The only question is how quickly, and whether you will keep your minds when the change completes. How long? Roderick asked. Days. Weeks. It varies. Some resist longer than others. Some embrace it, and the change accelerates. The shadow binder who went with you, Malara, she embraced it completely. She is lost now, transformed fully. More shadow than flesh, more absence than presence. The others, Kavo said. The priest, the Jogos Nai woman. What happened to them? The priest found what he sought, union with his god. The black goat devours those who serve it most faithfully. As for the plains woman, the old man's expression softened slightly. She gave herself to delay the shadow things, a noble sacrifice. Her spirit may find peace in whatever afterlife her people believe in, or perhaps not. The shadow corrupts even death. Roderick felt his knees weaken. Kavo caught him again, lowering him to sit on the black stones. You have days, the old man said, perhaps a week. Use them wisely. Say your farewells. Make your peace. And when the change completes, do not fight it. Those who fight suffer. Those who accept simply fade. There must be something, Roderick said desperately. Some ritual, some magic. There is one thing. The old man's expression was grim. But the price is higher than you would wish to pay. Name it, Kavo said immediately. Return to Stygai. Enter the Temple of the Void. Complete the transformation deliberately with full knowledge. You will lose your humanity, yes, but you will retain your awareness, yourself. You will become shadows, but shadows that remember being men, like Malara, like the Seekers, like all those who haunt the deep shadow. That's not salvation, Roderick said. That's damnation. Is it? The old man tilted his head. What is worse, to fade slowly into absence, losing yourself piece by piece, or to choose your transformation, to walk into the shadow with eyes open and will intact? At least the latter offers control. Or we could sail west, Kavo said. Return to Karth, to Volantis. Spend what time remains in the Greenlands among the living. You could try. The old man's smile was pitying. But the shadow-touched cannot leave the shadow. Not truly. Oh, you might sail west, might see green grass and blue skies again, but you will bring the shadow with you. It will spread from you like a disease. Plants will wither where you walk. Animals will flee your presence. And the people? He trailed off. What about the people? Roderick asked, though he feared the answer. They will see what you are becoming, and they will be right to fear you. You carry Stigai in your souls now, gentlemen. You are contagion, corruption, walking wounds in reality. Better to remain in Asshai, where such things are understood, expected, even welcomed. The old man turned to leave, then paused. There is a house, the Street of Shadows, third building from the fountain. Go there. The one who dwells there has experience with those in your condition. She may offer comfort, if not cure. Who is she? Kavo asked. A shadowbinder, one of the oldest. Some say she stood in Stigai when it was still a living city. Others say she is Stigai, given human form. I do not know the truth, but she helps the shadow-touched, after her fashion. With that cryptic statement, he shuffled away, disappearing into the crowds that were not quite crowds, the living that were not quite alive. They found the house on the Street of Shadows. It was larger than its neighbors, made of the same black stone, but carved with symbols that were different, older, cruder, as if predating written language itself. The door stood open, darkness pooling within. This is a terrible idea, Kavo said. Do you have a better one? They entered. The interior was wrong. Doorways opened onto rooms that couldn't possibly fit within the building's exterior dimensions. Hallways stretched farther than should be physically possible. And everywhere glass candles burned, hundreds of them casting light in every color, creating shadows that danced and merged and separated in hypnotic patterns. Welcome. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, shadow-touched from the deep places, seekers who went to Stigai and came back changed. Welcome to my house. A figure emerged from the dancing shadows, female, tall, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from darkness itself. Her face was hidden behind a mask of polished black stone, but her eyes, gods, her eyes were visible through the mask's empty sockets. They were ancient beyond measure, holding depths that made even Stigai seem shallow. I am Ashira, she said. I have walked the shadow for longer than your families have existed. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched the world change while I remained. And I understand what is happening to you. Can you stop it? Roderick asked. No, but I can teach you to endure it, to retain yourself even as your substance changes, to become shadow without losing what makes you human. How? Kavo demanded. Ashira moved closer, and Roderick saw that she cast no shadow at all. Not because she blocked no light, but because she was shadow, given temporary form through will and ancient sorcery. By accepting what you are becoming, by understanding that flesh and shadow are not opposites, but points on a spectrum. You are transitioning from one to the other. I can guide that transition, shape it, ensure that your minds remain even as your bodies fade. And the price? Roderick asked, knowing there would be one. Service. When the transformation completes, you will serve Asshai. You will be its guardians, its watchers, its shadows that protect. You will hunt the things that escape from the deeper shadow. You will prevent others from making your mistakes. You will be wardens at the boundary between the living and the absent. For how long? Kavo asked. Forever. Ashira's voice held something like sympathy. Or until the shadow itself ends, which amounts to the same thing. You sought knowledge in Stigai. You found it. Now you must pay the price of knowing. This is that price, eternal service in exchange for eternal existence. Roderick looked at Chavo. The sellsword's face was haggard, aged, already beginning to show the translucence that marked advancing transformation. What if we refuse? Roderick asked. Then you will fade completely within days. You will become thoughtless shadows, wandering Asshai without purpose or memory. Or worse, you will be drawn back to Stigai, to the temple, to serve whatever waits there. At least with me, you retain choice, will, purpose. It was no choice at all, really. Damnation or damnation, with only the flavor different. I accept, Kavo said, his voice hollow. Eternal service is still better than oblivion. Ashira's masked face turned to Roderick. And you, Captain, you who dreamed of Stigai from across the world, you who answered the calling despite all warnings, what do you choose? Roderick thought of his wife, his daughters, the debts he'd sailed east to clear, the dragon eggs that had proven worthless, forgeries, illusions, promises that were always meant to be broken. He had come seeking gold and found only shadow, had sought to save his family and instead doomed himself. But perhaps in service to Ashira, he could prevent others from making the same mistake. I accept, he said quietly. Teach me to endure. Teach me to remain myself, even as I become something else. So be it. Ashira raised her hands, and the glass candles flared brighter. The transformation will take 3 days. It will not be pleasant. But at the end, you will be shadows with minds, wardens of the boundary, guardians of the gate. She gestured, and doorways opened in the walls, doorways that had not been there before. Enter. Let the change complete, and when you emerge, you will be mine, and Asshai's, forever. Roderick walked toward his appointed door, Kavo toward his. At the threshold, Roderick looked back one final time at the world of flesh and light. Then he stepped into darkness, and the door closed behind him. 6 months later, Storm's End, the Stormlands. The Maester's tower caught the afternoon light, though afternoon was a generous term for the gray pallor that passed for daylight in the Stormlands during winter. Meister Crescent sat at his desk, surrounded by scrolls and correspondence, when the knock came. "Enter," he called, not looking up from the letter he was writing. The door opened slowly, and a man stepped through. Crescent glanced up, then did a double take. The visitor was gaunt, hollow-eyed, with a skin that seemed too pale, almost translucent in the dim light. He wore traveler's clothes that hung loose on his frame, and he moved with a strange, gliding gait that set Crescent's teeth on edge. "I am Maester Crescent," he said cautiously. "How may I assist you?" "My name is Roderick Faring," the man said, his voice rough from disuse. Or it was. "I need you to write something down. A warning, a testimony, before I forget how to speak at all." Crescent studied the man more carefully. House Faring. Yes, a minor house sworn to Storm's End. He vaguely recalled hearing that the family's eldest son had sailed east months ago and never returned. Lost at sea, the rumors said. Dead in Essos, most likely. But this man claimed to be Roderick Faring. And looking at him, truly looking, Crescent saw the resemblance to old Lord Faring in the shape of his face, though everything else about him seemed wrong. "You're dead," Crescent said, "or supposed to be." "In a sense, I am." Roderick's smile was bitter. "I died in Asshai-by-the-Shadow, Meister. I died and became something else. But I have a few hours, perhaps a day, before I must return, before the compulsion becomes too strong to resist, and in that time I need you to record what I have to say." "Record what, exactly?" "The truth about the Shadowlands, about Asshai, about what lies beyond." Roderick moved to the window, staring out at the familiar landscape of his homeland. "The truth about what waits in the dark places of the world, and why we must never go looking for it." Crescent felt a chill despite the brazier warming his chamber. Something in the man's voice, in his hollow eyes, spoke of experiences that should not exist, of knowledge that should remain unknown. "Very well," Crescent said, pulling a fresh sheet of parchment toward him and uncapping his inkwell. "Tell me your story." So Roderick spoke, and Crescent wrote. He told of the voyage east, of the dreams that called him across half the world. He described Asshai, its black stone streets, its shadowbinders in red masks, its absolute absence of children or life. He spoke of Malara's offer, the dragon eggs that were worthless forgeries, the expedition into the deeper shadow. Crescent's hand cramped as he wrote, but he did not stop. The story was too terrible, too important. Roderick described the ruined cities older than memory, the dragon skeleton larger than castles, the beings that hunted with beauty instead of claws. He told of the priest who walked willingly into darkness, of Inara's sacrifice to buy them time. His voice broke only once when describing her final moments. She gave herself, Roderick said quietly, so that we might escape. But we did not escape. Not really. We merely delayed our fate. He spoke of Stigai. Crescent's quill faltered when Roderick described the corpse city. Its impossible architecture, its cyclopean towers, the plaza of screaming statues, the temple of the void. What is it? Crescent asked, unable to help himself. The temple. What dwells there? Nothing, Roderick said. That's what makes it terrible. Not a god, not a demon, nothing. Absence itself, given awareness. A hole in reality that hungers and remembers and waits. Malara entered seeking eternal life, and she found it. But existence without substance is not life. It is imprisonment in a form that cannot die, but cannot truly live. He described their flight from Stigai, the shadow things that pursued them, Inara's final sacrifice. His voice was flat now, emotionless, as if the memories had been drained of feeling. And then we reached Asshai, Roderick continued. Changed, corrupted. We were given a choice by one called Ashira. Fade into nothing, or serve as wardens. Guards against the very darkness we had foolishly entered. You chose service, Crescent said. I did. Kavo did. We spent 3 days in transformation. Do you know what it feels like, Master? To feel your flesh become shadow? To watch your hands grow translucent? To feel your substance draining away until you're more absence than presence? Crescent did not answer. He simply wrote. When it was complete, Roderick said, staring at his own hands, we were no longer men. We were shadows with minds, still aware, still capable of thought, but no longer truly alive. We serve Ashira now. We hunt the things that escape from the deeper shadow. We prevent others from making our mistakes. Then why are you here? Crescent asked. Why leave Asshai? Because I had to warn you, had to warn everyone. Roderick turned from the window, and in the dim light, Crescent saw that the man cast no shadow at all. The absence where his shadow should be was darker than natural darkness, as if light itself fled from him. The shadow grows, Roderick said urgently, slowly but constantly, a few inches each year. It consumed nations during the long night. It grew after Valeria's doom. And it grows now, spreading from Asshai outward. One day, perhaps in a century, perhaps in 1,000 years, it will reach Yiti, then Korth, then the free cities, and eventually Westeros itself. That's impossible, Crescent protested. The world is vast. The world is finite, Roderick interrupted, and the shadow's patient. It has existed since before humanity. It will exist after. But there are ways to slow it, to prevent it from spreading faster. He leaned forward, his translucent hands gripping the edge of Crescent's desk. Never go to Asshai, he said intensely. Never sail beyond the Jade Sea. Never listen to voices and dreams that call you east. And most importantly, never, ever enter the Shadowlands themselves. Those who do either die or become what I have become. Why does Asshai exist then? Crescent asked. Why do people live there, if it's so dangerous? People don't live in Asshai. They exist there. It's a prison and a fortress both. The Shadowbinders, those like Ashira, who transformed centuries or millennia ago, they maintain the boundary. They keep the deeper shadow contained. They hunt the things that try to escape. Without them, the shadow would spread unchecked. Roderick pulled back, moving toward the door. I can feel it calling me back, he said. The compulsion. I am bound to Asshai now, to the shadow. I can venture into the world of light for short periods, but I must always return. It is my prison and my purpose. Wait, Crescent called. Your family, your wife and daughters. Do they know you're here? Roderick paused at the threshold, his back to the maester. No, he said quietly, and they must not. Let them believe I died at sea. Let them mourn and move on. Better they remember me as I was than see what I have become. But the debts, Crescent said, remembering. Your father's debts, That's why you sailed east, wasn't it? To clear them? Tell Lord Faring, Roderick's voice caught. Tell him I'm sorry. I sought to save our family and instead doomed myself. Perhaps that is the true price of the shadow. It takes not just your substance, but your purpose. Everything I did for them. And in the end, I can give them nothing but this warning. I will ensure it reaches the citadel, Cresson promised. Your testimony will be recorded, shared among the Meisters. Perhaps it will prevent others from following your path. Perhaps. Roderick sounded doubtful. But the calling is strong. Those who hear it rarely resist. I did not. Neither did Malara, the priest, Inara, or Kavo. We all heard our names spoken in darkness, and we all answered. He opened the door, late afternoon light spilling into the chamber. In that light, Roderick was barely visible, almost transparent, more suggestion than substance. One more thing, he said, about Staigai, about the Temple of the Void. Yes, it is not a ruin. It is not abandoned. Something lives there, or exists there, and it is aware, patient, ancient beyond measure. The Bloodstone Emperor may have been the last to enter and emerge transformed, but he was not the first. The temple has been calling to humanity since before the long night, perhaps since before humanity existed at all. What does it want? Cresson asked. To be fed, Roderick said simply. The shadow hungers, Master, always. And every person who enters Staigai, every fool who answers the calling, feeds it, makes it stronger, helps it grow. Then you fed it too, Cresson realized, by going there. Yes, Roderick's laugh was hollow. I fed the very thing I now guard against. That is my punishment, to spend eternity preventing others from making my mistake, while knowing I contributed to the problem. That is the Shadow's joke, its curse. He stepped fully into the doorway, and in the light, he was almost invisible. Write it all down, he said, every word. Send copies to the citadel, to the great houses, to anyone who will listen, and include this warning. The Shadowlands are not a place. They are a wound, a tear in the fabric of the world. And like all wounds, they either heal or they fester and spread. For 10,000 years they have been festering. The Shadowbinders of Asshai hold the line, but they cannot hold forever. One day, the wound will split open, and the shadow will pour forth into the world of light. When that day comes, no castle will stand against it. No army will prevail. The world will become what Staigai is now, a realm of eternal twilight, where the living fade and only shadows remain. This is the truth beyond Asshai. This is the terrifying truth of the Shadowlands, and I am living proof of what awaits those who dare to seek it. With those final words, Roderick Faring stepped through the doorway and was gone. Cresson rushed to the window and looked down, but saw no one on the path below. The man had simply vanished, as if he'd never been there at all. Only the pages of testimony remained, filled with Cresson's cramped handwriting, proof that the encounter had been real. Or had it? Cresson stared at the parchment, doubt creeping in. Had he truly spent hours writing? The light suggested only minutes had passed, and the story itself, so fantastical, so impossible. Shadow things and ancient temples and cities of black stone. Surely it was fever dream, hallucination, some trick of the mind. He was about to crumple the pages when he noticed something. His shadow, cast by the brazier's light, was behaving strangely. It moved a fraction of a second after he did, like an echo. And its shape was subtly wrong. The head too large, the arms too long, just like Roderick had described. With trembling hands, Cresson set the pages aside and looked at his shadow more carefully. As he watched, it seemed to solidify, becoming darker than a natural shadow should be. And for just a moment, surely his imagination, it appeared to move independently, raising one hand while Cresson's own hand remained still. Then it returned to normal, or seemed to. Cresson sat heavily in his chair, staring at the testimony. Perhaps Roderick Faring had been real. Perhaps he had truly returned from Asshai to deliver his warning. And perhaps in those hours of speaking and listening, some small measure of the shadow had transferred. Or perhaps Cresson was simply an old man, tired from too much study, seeing phantoms in candlelight. He did not know, could not know, and that uncertainty was itself a kind of shadow, a darkness that could never be fully dispelled. 3 days later, Meister Cresson finished making copies of Roderick Faring's testimony. He sent one to the Citadel, one to Lord Baratheon at Storm's End, and kept one for his own records. The letter to the Citadel included a note. Archmaster Walgrave, I submit for the Citadel's records a testimony given by one claiming to be Roderick Faring of Storm's End, who reported traveling to Asshai-by-the-Shadow and the lands beyond. I cannot verify the truth of his account, but I felt it important to record and share. Whether this testimony represents genuine experience, fever dream, or elaborate fabrication, I leave to wiser men to determine. However, I note the following. House Faring's eldest son did sail east 6 months ago, and was presumed lost. The details provided about Asshai match what little we know from other travelers' accounts, and certain elements of the story, particularly regarding the Shadowlands' slow expansion, align with ancient texts I have found in our library. I also note, though it may be my imagination, that my own shadow has behaved strangely since recording this testimony. I mention this not as proof, but as observation. Make of this what you will. In service, Meister Cresson. He sealed the letter and gave it to the Raven Master. That night, Cresson dreamed of black stone cities and towers that touched the sky. He dreamed of a voice calling his name in a language he did not speak, but somehow understood. He dreamed of walking east, always east, toward a destination he had never seen but felt he had always known. He woke in darkness, his heart pounding, and checked his shadow by candlelight. It was normal, perfectly normal, wasn't it? Cresson blew out the candle and lay back down, but he did not sleep again that night. Instead, he stared at the ceiling and wondered whether Roderick Faring's warning had come too late, whether the coaling had already begun, whether he, too, would one day hear his name spoken in dreams and find himself unable to resist. In the darkness, his shadow seemed to deepen, and in Asshai-by-the-Shadow, 10,000 miles away, Roderick Faring stood at his post at the edge of the city, watching the deeper shadow for things that might try to escape. His service had begun. His service would never end. He had sought gold and found only shadow. He had sought to save his family and became a warning for all others. And in the deep places of Stigai, in the Temple of the Void, something ancient and patient smiled without a mouth and whispered names into the dreams of the living. Come, come to me, come home. The calling continued. It always would.